Hi everyone, my name is Ashley Dimmig and I'm the Wieler-Mellon Postdoctoral Curatorial Fellow in Islamic Art at the Walters Art Museum in Baltimore, Maryland. Today I'd like to share with you some of the highlights of the Islamic art collection at the Walters, from the earliest centuries of Islam through the medieval period and into the 17th and 18th centuries, representing over a millennium of artistic production. Upon his death in 1931, Henry Walters, after whom the museum is named, bequeathed his art collection, along with 2 buildings and an endowment, to the city of Baltimore for the benefit of the public. Now in 2020, we continue to serve the public, even as we've all had to adapt to a much more virtual world. The Walters Islamic Art Collection contains approximately 1,200 objects, in addition to which are nearly 200 Islamic manuscripts and single-page paintings in the collection of rare books and manuscripts. This area of the collection was developed by Henry Walters himself, who traveled to Istanbul and Cairo, even though many of the Islamic art objects he collected were purchased through prominent dealers tied to the region, such as Dikran Kalikian. You can read more about the objects we'll talk about today, as well as many others in our collection, in our new collections guide, titled The Walters Art Museum, Excursions Through the Collection. Let's start with this magnificently illuminated 15th century Quran, which was the first object from the Islamic world that Henry Walters ever purchased. From there, he'd go on to develop a rich collection of art from Islamic cultures, including manuscripts, textiles, metalwork, glass, ceramics, architectural fragments, and much more. This double-page opening comes after several densely illuminated frontispieces and contains the first 7 verses of the Quran. It also foreshadows the complex textual nature of the book. In addition to the Quranic text in Arabic, arranged within the text frame, explanations of particular words and phrases fill the margins. Further still, throughout the manuscript, Persian translations of the verses are written in red ink between the Arabic lines written in black. You can explore those pages and many more manuscripts that have been digitized on the Walters Manuscripts webpage, linked below. Henry Walters' interest in the arts of the Islamic world began with an interest in the ancient Near East. Objects such as this silver plate, dating to either the late Sasanian or early Islamic period in Iran, speak to the connection between late antique and early Islamic art. Not just in Iran, but in much of the Islamic world, the earliest art and architecture adopted and adapted pre-existing traditions, such as Byzantine-style mosaics, or in this case, Sasanian silver vessels. In Sasanian Iran, silver was reserved almost exclusively for royal use, but gold was once present here too. Examining the engraved surface through a microscope reveals evidence of now mostly lost gilding in several areas, including the patterns of the king's garment. The plate depicts a king and queen, elaborately dressed, wearing crowns, and sitting on a wide banqueting couch. They're surrounded by an abundance of food, including 3 boars' heads below, perhaps the spoils from a recent hunt. While characteristically Sasanian in its form, material, and imagery, objects like this continue to be used and produced after the arrival of Islam in the region. Also from the earliest centuries of Islam, though this time from the Levant or Eastern Mediterranean region, this solid glass weight is dated to the year 126 of the Hijri calendar, corresponding to 743 of the Common Era. It was used to weigh or measure currency in the form of copper, silver, and gold coins. In fact, the rows of Arabic writing stamped into the glass, when it was still semi-molten, resembles the largely text-based design of coins made in this period. While measuring less than 3 inches in diameter, the weight's inscription provides a significant amount of information. It tells us the name of the caliph or ruler when it was made, Yazid III, as well as the name of the financial director of the treasury in Damascus. Yet the part of the inscription perhaps most pertinent to the weight's function is the short cautionary note at the top: God commands honesty. These glass beakers were made in the same region as the glass weight, but several centuries later, during the so-called Crusader period, so that's roughly the 12th and 13th centuries, when the Latin West sought to reclaim the Holy Lands from Muslim control. The drinking vessels are slightly different sizes, as you can see, but their similarities in form and decoration suggest that they were possibly a set. The upper register of each bears a relatively generic Arabic inscription praising God and an unnamed ruler. Both also depict different domed architectural structures, as well as human figures wearing garb reminiscent of those worn by Christian monks. And here we've now rotated them so you can see the other side. In addition to these recognizably Christian figures, a man riding a donkey seems to represent Christ's entry into Jerusalem. These medieval glass vessels reflect both the diverse and intercultural nature of the Islamic world, but also calls into question the very notion of what Islamic art is and how it's categorized in scholarship and in museums. Generally, in these contexts, we define Islamic art as objects made by Muslims, for Muslims, or in Muslim-majority cultures, but even this definition can be fluid. Indeed, Islamic art may or may not have explicitly religious functions. And just as there's no singular monolithic Islam, there is no single definition of Islamic art. Dating to the same time period as the glass beakers, so the mid-13th century, this inlaid metal ewer bears the name of its designer around the neck of the vessel, Yunus ibn Yusuf al-Naqash al-Mawsili. Not only does the name of itself indicate that Yunus is the designer, al-Naqash, of the ewer, it also tells us he was from the city of Mosul in Iraq. As is typical of this type of inlaid metal ewer, and that's the indicating where his name is on the vessel, there are several roundels here with this scalloped edges, framing little vignettes. And these are quite typical of these kinds of inlaid metal ewers, and they're depicting relatively ordinary courtly scenes. So if we're starting on the right here, we have an archer on horseback, musicians sitting under a tree, and a man kissing the hand of an enthroned ruler on the left. Inscriptions continue to play a prominent role both aesthetically and for the meaning the words convey. On this plaque, the mihrab, or prayer niche, typically seen embedded in the Qibla wall of a mosque, which orients the faithful toward Mecca, is represented in ceramic. So the plaque is really more of kind of like a thick tile. As a discrete object, rather than as part of the architecture of a mosque, this mihrab is portable. For this reason, ceramic mihrabs like this can be found in various types of buildings, not just mosques, so also shrines and mausolea, for example. The large inscription begins at the bottom right corner with the Bismillah, in the name of God, the merciful, the compassionate, and continues with a Quranic verse that speaks about the timing of prayer. Establish regular prayers at the sun's decline till the darkness of the night and the morning prayer and reading. For the prayer and reading in the morning carry their testimony. This evocation of day and night, dark and light, is literally reflected on the surface of the plaque. This type of ceramic is known as lusterware due to its luminescent surface treatment. Another ceramic tile, though this time dating to the 17th century and made in the Ottoman Empire, likewise marries representational imagery with descriptive and informative text. The 3 lines of Arabic writing in the upper part of this large wall tile are from the 3rd chapter of the Quran and call the Muslim faithful to make pilgrimage to Mecca. The central panel of the composition is filled with a bird's eye representation of the Great Mosque in Mecca, with the Kaaba, Islam's holiest shrine, in the center and surrounded by various other structures, all of which are appropriately labeled. Tiles like this can be seen in various architectural contexts in Istanbul, the former Ottoman capital. The tile may have been created to introduce potential pilgrims to the places they would encounter on their journey. Or perhaps these details serve to recall the memory of the journey for those who have already completed it. Perhaps it served both functions. This gun, another piece from the Ottoman Empire, is a true collection, a true treasure of our collection, It's also a collection unto itself, as you'll see. And it's certainly one of my favorite objects. Every surface of the gun is encrusted with precious metals and various types of gemstones. Inside the butt of the gun, behind a gold filigree panel, is a diamond tura, or insignia, of Ottoman Sultan Mahmud I, who ruled from 1730 to 1754. It also gives the year the gun was made, 1145 of the Hijri calendar, corresponding to the early years of the Sultan's reign. The gun, which as we'll see, is much more than meets the eye. It was purchased by Henry Walters in 1905 from an antiques dealer, Robert S. Pardo, based in Istanbul. Pardo provided Walters with this handwritten book detailing the various objects he purchased from him, and several pages are dedicated to this gun. This book tells a dramatic and fanciful tale about the gun's origins. So the story goes, the Sultan commanded the best gunsmiths in the land to bring him a gun, a special gun, one with which he could kill an animal without shooting it, and with which he could sign imperial decrees while on the hunt. After many failures, finally a genius artist brought the Sultan this gun, out of which the master pulled a dagger, showing the Sultan he could use it to kill an animal without shooting it, as well as a bejeweled pen box and writing implements, with which he could sign decrees. All of these objects, as well as all of the implements used for shooting the gun, are equally lavish in their jeweled decoration, and all of them fit into discrete little compartments within the gun. So while this was a fun story, in reality, many artisans were involved in the design, engineering, and decoration of Mahmud's gun set. The gunsmith Ismail impressed his mark on the gun's barrel. The goldwork and jeweling can be attributed to an Armenian Christian, Hovannes Agaduzian, who was the chief goldsmith under Mahmud's predecessor and continued to work in that elevated position for Mahmud. The lock, which was added later to the gun, potentially replacing the lost original, also bears the name of its maker, Muhammad, and its former owner, Ahmed Khan. Taken together, this unique set of objects represents two activities important to Ottoman sultans in this period: marksmanship and calligraphy. The gun, however, was never shot, and therefore probably served as a spectacular element of imperial regalia. These are just a few highlights from a millennium of time across different cultures in the Islamic world, which are merely a small representation of the absolutely spectacular Islamic art collection at the Walters Art Museum. Here are a few sources for further reading on these objects, and here especially I reproduced the citation for the new handbook at the top and the website of the Walters manuscripts that are digitized at the bottom. Thank you for taking this virtual tour with me, and we hope to see you in Baltimore soon.